Yeah, hard, but yeah. How did it work so well?
I just gonna say, you don't need to hear, right?
Let's see what I've done there.
We have.
We open my phone. Like. We'll see.
Is Christian going to get sandbag?
Yeah, he's going to get a sandbag. Yeah.
Doesn't have time to go to the bathroom. I think you got time, yeah. Okay. I think never start on time, you know that.
You actually, once you get up to this weight already, take off. Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, no.
Guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
What's that? Okay.
Yeah.
I can't watch
No, I think heroes. Oh, okay.
I will.
Yes. Forgot. Okay. They're pulling ass up. All right. Oh, sorry, sir. So, positions. Test. Test.
Have to come back.
Okay. Test. Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem. You're a hero. That's it. Profit.
Even trying to make a phone call here. Is it? Mhm. When you went to the restroom, you tried to make one? Couldn't?
Well, no,
I
I even tried just calling to say, hey, we're live, and it's
Right.
like,
nothing.
no.
See how our live feed looks. You also could turn on the air conditioner if they want.
What's that?
I said they could turn on the air conditioner, but
You know, yeah.
yeah. Let me do one more great shot.
That's all of them.
Yeah, I always. Yeah.
Maria, you have any issues, baby? Baby, like, sweet. That's such a big deal.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
How funny.
Frank, nice to meet you, man.
I do, I remember her, and it's, I've always said they got much.
I will go. I'll speak.
Young,
Yes.
Bianco.
Beyond.
Okay. Yeah, number.
Yep, and for these guys, yeah, Laura brought this up.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Chief. So we have a lot of things like might have been lost. And it was like WNR, and then maybe when I was doing DMZ, but she's the one who went straight.
Yeah.
It was straight there. And obviously, the big balance is still. I work with her. Faculty and go.
Yeah,
And like on the morning show, when we come, like, I on morning shows.
it's fun. I put up, I'm pumping up some good talent.
We do try. You know, in terms of photos, so I kind of figure I'm gonna be here in winter there, so. I'll just-
I think it's this thing here. You're with me. Okay. You get to where I need. I try to pay for it.
I think that's real. I remember when I was a young boy, young guy, it was like, I saw that for people and I would feel like I was asking about the things that you I can make propose. But I, you know,
You always.
I actually wrote down on the GC stats more area. Exactly. Or that was business. I can.
I almost, usually would bring my multi, but I was sleeping on like that 8 today. Yeah. There. And then you so before it starts, and you just want to see, okay, I'm just talking around. Yeah. It's the big far less like I'm such a trip. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. You just gonna pull that grip where you have this? No, I didn't.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
There we go. Farmers, thanks.
That's
That's what you want. Sure. Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome to the. I'll try it again. Good morning. Welcome to the Committee on Homeland Security Democratic Shadow Hearing entitled Seeking Justice, Oversight of ICE's Use of Force and the Death of Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero. I began this morning by recognizing myself for an opening statement. Then I recognize some of my colleagues to offer their own statement before we hear testimony from our witnesses. While there won't be an opportunity for questions from the public today, we value your input and encourage you to offer written comments on the cards provided at the door. Every one of those comments, along with the testimony received from our shadow witnesses, will be part of this shadow hearings record and will help inform our congressional oversight. I want to express my sincere appreciation to Rep. Pingree for bringing us together in Biddeford today. Rep. Pingree is fully committed to seeking justice in this tragic case, and she's a tireless advocate for the community that has been terrorized by ICE. Thank you for your leadership. We're here today to demand accountability for the death of Jon Fetherston, a 25-year-old father and work permit holder from Colombia, killed in front of his young daughter by an ICE officer with a history of violence, who was by all accounts was unfit to have a badge and a gun. His death is a direct result of the Trump administration's unlawful, out of control immigration policies. Unfortunately, Jon Fetherston's killing isn't an isolated case. Across our country, immigration officers have hurt and killed Americans and immigrants alike, created chaos in our communities, and violated the law. Despite promising to go after the worst of the worst, ICE is arresting people with no criminal record to fulfill arbitrary, politically motivated quotas, and by making our communities less safe. ICE lowered hiring standards and reduced training have led us to hiring unfit officers and putting them on our streets with catastrophic results. The Department of Homeland Security has lied repeatedly about what happened in these shootings, falsely blaming the victims and then backtracking when video footage contradicts their lies. Rather than reining in ICE, congressional Republicans have refused to conduct oversight of the agency, instead giving ICE billions in taxpayers' dollars with no strings attached. This is absolutely outrageous. Thank you. In the absence of action by our Republican colleagues, Homeland Security Committee Democrats have held forums and conducted site visits in communities devastated by ICE's immigration policies. We've heard from elected leaders, community members, and grieving families from Houston, New Orleans, New Jersey, Chicago, Minneapolis, and beyond. And now, tragically, we add Biddeford to this list of communities that have suffered a terrible loss. Today, we will hear testimony from family members, elected officials, attorneys, and advocacy groups about what happened. And we will hear about what Congress must do to prevent yet another life being cut short by a rogue ICE agent who decides to shoot first and ask questions later. I pray that congressional Republicans hear the witnesses' testimony and realize they can't sit idly by as innocent people are shot and killed by their own government. Please know that we will do everything possible to hold the Trump administration accountable for what happened here in Biddeford. Ensure federal government cooperates fully with the state of Maine's investigation and prevent future senseless tragedies. We stand united in support of this proud community. We will not look away. We will not stop, and we will not allow these abuses to go unchallenged. Thank you. And now I introduce someone to you who's no stranger. I recognize Rep. Pingree to offer her opening statement.
Thank you so much, Ranking Member Thompson, and to my colleagues who are here today. Before I start my opening statement, I just want to give a quick thank you to everyone who has made it possible for us to be here today. I really appreciate all the law enforcement officers in the room and the Biddeford Police Department under Chief Fisk, Superintendent Jeremy Moe, who allowed us to use this space, all the municipal and school employees who have allowed us to be here and set this up, my own team who's worked hard on putting this together, the Democratic Committee staff and the staff who works for all of my colleagues who have done so much. And I also want to give a thank you to all of the elected officials who are in the room with us today. I know, you know, we can pop in for a minute and go back to Washington, and you are the ones who are here dealing with grieving communities and frightened constituents. I don't have time to introduce all of you, but could you just stand up if you're in any elected legislative municipal office, just so everyone knows how many of you are in the room. Thank you so much for your leadership and for the opportunities I have to work with so many of you. I'm just grateful for all of you and your service. And again, thank you to Ranking Member Thompson, to my other colleagues here today, taking time flying from Mississippi, Louisiana, Massachusetts. We've got them all. I just want to begin by saying something that's so obvious, but the reason we are here today, Johann Sebastian Jerome Guerrero should be alive today. He should be at home with his partner. He should be watching his 3-year-old daughter grow up, going to work. He should be part of this diverse and vibrant community. Instead, his life was tragically cut short. Just a little over a mile from where we now sit, a federal immigration enforcement agent shot and killed him as he was leaving for work. I am still so angry that a young man ended up dead on our streets and that his daughter will now grow up without a father. More than 1 month later, there are still so many basic questions about what happened that remained unanswered by ICE and the Trump administration. We are here to examine the circumstances of that tragic morning in July and the enforcement policies that brought armed federal agents into our quiet communities in the first place, and whether ICE has even a basic understanding of the people it's targeting. We know that Johann Sebastian was not the intended target of the operation, and he did not have a final order of removal. He had a pending asylum case and a valid work permit. In just the past few days, we have learned that ICE's intended target, Johann Sebastian's roommate and the owner of the car he was driving that morning, also did not have a final removal order. This shocking revelation, in clear contradiction to what ICE and DHS have been saying about the operation, raises fundamental questions. How is ICE deciding who to target and detain in Maine? What information are its agents relying on? And is anyone checking whether that information is complete or even correct before armed officers are sent into our communities? As so many of you know, all too personally, we are seeing this happen over and over again. If ICE cannot accurately determine a person's immigration status or circumstance before taking enforcement action, that is a profound failure of competence and accountability that is leading to innocent people who are following the law and doing everything asked of them, being caught in ICE's crosshairs. The consequences, as Johann Sebastian's family knows all too painfully, can be deadly. For months, Mainers have been forced to endure an aggressive federal immigration enforcement campaign across our state. We saw it during the disgustingly named Operation Catch of the Day earlier this year. Now, while that surge may have seemed short-lived, ICE operations have not by any means ended here. We are now seeing their threatening presence extended into the Portland Jetport and other places that are supposed to be safe and protected, not to mention they are essential to Maine's communities and our economy. I hear daily from constituents like all of you who are frightened. They're frightened for themselves, their families, their neighbors, and their fellow Mainers. I hear from employers and small business owners who are worried for their employees, who are afraid to leave their homes. I hear from attorneys who are frustrated by the lack of cooperation from the federal government while they try to represent their clients. And I hear from local officials who do not know what federal agents are doing in their communities or why they are here. If the Trump administration, their DHS, is going to send armed immigration officers into Maine, then we deserve to have assurance that every possible safeguard is in place to protect anyone who is caught up in their incompetence. Today, we are very fortunate to have Johann Sebastian's parents, Dora and Omar, here. We have advocates who work tirelessly with and for Maine's immigrant communities, and we have elected officials like Biddeford's mayor, who has bravely led a grieving community. I just want to thank you so much for each being here and the work you are doing, particularly for Johann Sebastian's family. And for your for Dora and Omar, I am so deeply sorry for your loss. I cannot imagine how difficult it must be to sit in this room and relive the consequences surrounding the death of your son. My heart breaks for you and for his loving partner, Carolina, and their young child at home. I know this hearing cannot bring Johann Sebastian back, but Congress has an obligation to make sure that his death is not dismissed as an unfortunate consequence of immigration enforcement, and that his life is remembered for the humanity and dignity and love that he embodied. Immigration enforcement does not mean feckless free rein. ICE does not have a free pass to endanger the public, and no federal agency should be operating in Maine or anywhere else without accountability to the people it is supposed to serve. Johann Sebastian and his family deserve justice, and the people of Biddeford deserve answers. And the people of Maine deserve to feel safe in their own communities. That's why we're all here today. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. I now recognize the gentlewoman from Massachusetts, the Democratic Whip, Representative Clark, to offer an opening statement.
Thank you so much to Ranking Member Benny Thompson for convening this critical hearing. And a huge thanks to Congresswoman Pingree for being our host, for being your advocate, and for continuing to seek justice and the truth. We are so very grateful to you. Is that better? All right. I hope you heard my praise for your Congresswoman. I also want to thank my colleague, Congressman Troy Carter from New Orleans, Louisiana, and Governor Mills. Thank you for being here with us. But my most deep gratitude for our witnesses, excuse me, especially Mr. Duran Guerrero's family. We so appreciate you being here in this time of grief and pain and loss. And we appreciate all of you, the community members of Biddeford, and those who traveled here to make sure that we continue to shine a light on the truth of what happened here. And this pain is being felt across the country. Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero was a husband and a father who wanted to give his 3-year-old girl a shot at the American dream. His cold-blooded killing at the hands of a dangerous, out-of-control ICE agent, at the hands of an abuser with a history of violence against his own family, is not only a tragedy for this community, it is a moral stain on our government. This isn't someone that ICE was looking for. This isn't a warrant that they were executing. This wasn't a suspect. Johann Sebastian had not done anything illegal. This was a random stop that quickly escalated into a killing. All with ICE's body cams off. And even ICE knew that this had gone horribly wrong. Even they decided to halt all vehicular stops in the aftermath until Donald Trump reversed that decision, not only 24 hours later. If this can happen to Johann Sebastian, it can happen to anyone. If this can happen here in Biddeford, Maine, this can happen anywhere. ICE is a danger to every community in which they are active if they are not held accountable. We are witnessing state-sanctioned terror inflicted on innocent people by their own government. And we condemn it. House Democrats condemn it. All of us across this country condemn it, except for a specific group. Republicans in the House and in Congress continue to fund, greenlight, and cover up for this reckless agency. So our job here today, together, is to shine a light on the truth. And the truth is that these are not protectors of our community, of our laws, of our borders. This is a mass secret police force that has terrorized children, trampled on our Constitution, and wielded violence as a political weapon. And the truth is, the American people have had enough. Enough fear, enough terror, enough inaction from Republicans that won't stand up to this injustice. So we thank you again for being here today. I thank the witnesses, not only for being here today, but the work you do across Maine every single day for immigrant communities. And I thank you for speaking out and sharing your stories. I am so grateful to my colleagues and to the family of Johann Sebastian for this important and urgent discussion. I yield back.
Young lady yields back. I'd like to now invite Representative Finley to introduce our first panel of witnesses.
We are very fortunate today and very grateful. The parents of Johann Sebastian are here with us today. So I would like to introduce Omar Duran Plata and to speak for the family and on behalf of all of us in this room. I hope you see the love and support that we all have for you, and that we are all here to do anything we possibly can for you and your family. After Omar Duran Plata, we will have the good fortune of hearing from our governor, Janet Mills, who is here today to support the committee of Biddeford, to talk about her efforts on behalf of our state of Maine to reduce the activities of ICE and let them know they are not welcome in our state. So I thank you both for speaking. We will begin with Omar Duran Plata. Thank you so much to you and your wife for being here today.
Buenos días. Mi nombre es Omar Durán, mi esposa Dora Guerrero. Somos los padres de Joan Sebastián Durán Guerrero, quien el 13 de julio de 2026, en un operativo de ICE, por uso excesivo de la fuerza, fue asesinado estando indefenso en el vehículo en el cual salía a trabajar esa mañana.
Good morning. My name is Omar Duran, and my wife is Dora Guerrero. We are the parents of Joan Sebastián Durán Guerrero, who on July 13, 2026, during an ICE operation, was killed as a result of excessive force while he was defenseless in the vehicle he was using to head to work that morning.
La muerte de nuestro hijo, hermano, padre y esposo nos ha dejado el corazón roto, un gran vacío en nuestras vidas, sintiendo un gran dolor en el alma, cuando su pequeña hija, nuestra nieta de 3 años, pregunta por su papá, ¿por qué él no ha llegado del trabajo?
The death of our son, a brother, a father, and a husband has left our hearts broken and a great emptiness in our lives. We feel a deep pain in our souls when his little daughter, our 3-year-old granddaughter, asks for her daddy and why he doesn't come home from work.
Esto es algo muy triste. Su esposa siente esa gran ausencia de mi hijo en su hogar, un hogar que fue formado en el amor, con ilusiones, esfuerzos y sueños por cumplir.
This is very sad. His wife feels his absence deeply in their home, a home they built with love, hopes, hard work, and dreams still to be fulfilled.
Nuestro hijo fue una persona maravillosa, responsable, honesta y amorosa. Estos son los valores que nosotros le enseñamos en nuestra casa. Él siempre se destacó por su gran sonrisa, por tener un corazón grande y bondadoso, por siempre estar dispuesto a ayudar a los demás.
Our son was a wonderful person, responsible, honest, and loving. These are the values we taught him in our home. He was known for his big smile, his big, kind heart, and for always being willing to help others.
Mi hijo siempre se esforzó por darle lo mejor a su pequeña familia, pero también a nosotros como padres y a sus hermanos.
Our son always worked hard to give the best he could to his little family, but also to us as his parents and to his sisters.
Joan Sebastián siempre estuvo pendiente de su mamá, quien padeció cáncer de seno. Mi hijo siempre estuvo ahí, siendo la fuerza y el apoyo para continuar con la vida. A pesar de la distancia, mi hijo siempre estuvo presente con un mensaje o una llamada.
Jon Sebastian always looked out for his mother, who suffered from breast cancer. Our son was always there, giving her the strength and support she needed to keep going. Despite the distance, he was always there for her, with a message or a phone call.
Nuestro sueño siempre fue volvernos a reencontrar y darnos un abrazo. Hoy ese sueño ya no puede realizarse. No sabemos cómo continuar la vida sin ti, hijo. Solo esperamos poder encontrar la fuerza para continuar.
Our dream was always to be reunited and to hold each other again. Today, that dream can no longer come true. We do not know how to go on with life without you, son. We only hope we can find the strength to continue.
La muerte de Joan Sebastián, en esas condiciones, a manos de ICE, nos llena de temor e incertidumbre a la comunidad. Por eso solo le pido a Dios y a la justicia que sea aclarado el caso de mi hijo y de muchos que han tenido que vivir esa situación como esta.
The death of Jon Sebastian under those conditions at the hands of ICE fills our community with fear and uncertainty. That is why I ask only of God and of the justice system that my son's case be brought to light, along with the cases of the many others who have had to go through something like this.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you so much. At the request of the family and their attorney, we will not ask any questions of this panel. Thank you so much.
We're looking forward to hearing from the governor. Thank you very much, Governor Mills.
Thank you.
Thank you, the Gran Plata. Muchas gracias, Señor Gran Plata, Dora, for your courage and for sharing your testimony. in this congressional field hearing, and my deepest condolences on behalf of the state of Maine to you and your family during this difficult time. Mi sentido pesa. Ranking Member Thompson, Congresswoman Clark, and Congresswoman Pingree. I appreciate your coming to Biddeford to hear directly from this community in the aftermath of this horrific tragedy. The violent death of a young father leaving his home on a quiet street to just go to work. Just a short ways from here. Like people across Maine, I am heartbroken. I'm furious. I'm outraged. It's the outrage that most people in this community feel. The outrage that most people in this state feel. The outrage that much of this country feels, as you have represented already in your remarks. Outrage not simply at Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero's death and the suffering of his family, but at the callous outrage at the callous and unregulated show of force by federal agents in cities across this country that is all too often creating situations that put everybody in danger in neighborhoods across every state. I'm not here to comment on the facts surrounding the tragedy. I do have full confidence in the Office of the Attorney General, led by Attorney General Aaron Fry, that they will complete a thorough investigation into the facts of this tragedy, and that they will report them to the public in due course. I have personally met with Mayor LaFountain, Speaker Fecto, Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero's family as represented by the Maine Immigrant Rights Coalition, Biddeford Representatives Gear and Mallon, and Biddeford Senator Henry Ingerson. I believe the city of Biddeford is doing everything it can to support this community, a community where 150 years ago, immigrants from Ireland and Canada, and later Greece, Italy, and France came to work to raise their families, and where Mainers, new Mainers now work and look to find peace and opportunity here in our state. I've directed our Maine Office of New Americans to conduct meetings in communities such as this one, and to hear from those who may feel less safe for obvious reasons because of federal immigration operations that are based on questionable numerical goals and political gamesmanship unrelated to public safety. The people of Maine, like people across this country, do not want to live in fear in their own communities. They do not want to see their loved ones and peace-abiding neighbors struck down by federal agents. They do want to see qualified law enforcement agents cracking down on human trafficking, on labor violations, illegal drug dealing. But they do not want federal agents roaming peaceful neighborhoods and stopping people for non-criminal behavior. Stopping them based on the color of their skin, their accent, their ethnic origin, or their mere status as a foreign-born individual. Look, here in Maine, we know what good law enforcement is. We know what it looks like. We're not against law enforcement. Here, members of law enforcement are held to high professional standards. They undergo substantial professional training, 18 weeks minimum at our renowned Criminal Justice Academy. They are accountable to the law. And I can tell you this, they don't arrest people in order to fill a quota or to respond to a political agenda. And by the way, we are proud that our state boasts of one of the lowest crime rates in the country. And yet, earlier this year, while conducting an enhanced enforcement operation in Maine, ICE agents actually arrested 2 Maine corrections officers, law enforcement, people who themselves are enforcing the law and helping keep us safe. And they targeted a nurse and a civil engineer, among other people who were productive members of our community with no criminal history. The unfairness of that operation and its disruptive influence on the peace of our communities and on the stability of our workforce in construction, transportation, healthcare, food processing, hospitality, and retail sectors of our economy. That's a major reason why the Maine State Chamber of Commerce complained to Congress that ICE's aggressive actions were hurting our economy. They called on Congress to require reform, restraint, and greater professionalism in that agency. At that time, I suggested the following specific reforms with respect to ICE. 1, prohibit agents from wearing masks. 2, require agents to identify themselves by voice and appearance, as our law enforcement do. 3, mandate the wearing of body cameras and preserving the videos. 4, provide much greater professional training. 5, pursue civil and criminal liability for abuses of power. And 6, require valid judicial warrants for arrests, among many other measures. That did not happen. Congress rejected many meaningful oversight measures. I'm not blaming parties present. And emboldened by Congress's failure to act, and by a Supreme Court ruling that allows the deportation of non-criminals who are merely escaping violence and disaster in war-torn countries. The Trump administration merely escalated ICE's bad tactics. There are reports now that the Trump administration is trying to equip agents with electric shock gloves. Yet another way to inflict fear and pain. Nothing more. And it appears that the administration is now deploying ICE agents at the Portland jetport, just recently detaining a highly valued nurse at Maine Medical Center and 5 others. Congress must send the clear and unmistakable message that these tactics are not just morally wrong, they also imperil the safety and security of every person who calls this country home. Following the death of Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero, I wrote to our delegation to urge Congress not simply to share in our grief or express concern or condolences, but to hold ICE accountable, to require all federal law enforcement agencies to respect the rule of law, honor our collective security in every way. Today, I call on Congress to rein in ICE, an objective I know many of you share. Because before more families are robbed of a loved one, this violence has to end. Before one more community is robbed of its peace and security, this has to end.
We do not feel safe.
Before more gunshots shatter another windshield and steal another person's life and fracture the freedom of all who seek peace, this has to end. Before the fragile American dream that was memorialized on hopeful parchment just 2.5 centuries ago, before that is altogether abandoned, it has to end. And if ICE cannot be reined in and fundamentally reformed, then it is time to abolish it. will know these things that were shared with not only people in this room, people of this community, but people in this state. And I speak on behalf of the 1.4 million people in this state who want to be safe and secure in their neighborhoods. And I want to offer my sincere appreciation for the work of Shelley Pingree, our good congresswoman. Whose persistence and compassion and intelligent leadership has stood for the truth and actually saved lives. Thank you. Please continue to good work.
Thank you so much, Governor, and to the parents of Jon Sebastian. We will now transition to our third panel of witnesses. Thank our witnesses for joining us today. Our first witness is Mr. Laham LaFont. I hope Mayor
Liam,
Leah,
what found?
Liam, Mayor Bill. As someone who was a mayor, a little younger than you, Mayor, I'm happy to see you. I had full head of hair when I was a mayor, but time passes on. Mayor has previously served 2 terms on the city council, including a term as council president. The mayor issued a formal proclamation last month demanding justice and accountability following the killing of Jon Sebastian. Our second witness is Mr. Benjamin Gideon, attorney for Jon Sebastian's family. Mr. Gideon holds a degree from Yale Law School and served as a clerk of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. He currently practices at Maine's largest plaintiff law firm. Our third witness is Ms. Sue Roche, Executive Director of the Immigrant Legal Advocacy Project. Ms. Roche has been with the organization since 2000, being with that organization and serving as its supervising attorney and legal director prior to her current position. During her tenure, program staffing and budget have grown threefold. Ms. Roche holds a JD from Northeastern University. Our fourth witness is Ms. Buffalo Chatham, Executive Director of the Maine Immigrant Rights Coalition. Ms. Chatham has built one of the most successful immigrant rights coalitions in Maine, representing over 100 member organizations, including immigrant advocacy group and grassroots community organization. Ms. Chatham holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Zambia. Our final witness is Ms. Crystal Crone, founding director of Presente Maine, which works to empower displaced Indigenous and Afro-Latino peoples of Maine. The organization provides holistic support to low-income workers and families to bridge gaps in healthcare, nutrition, housing, and safety. Welcome to our panel of witnesses. I will now recognize each of the witnesses for an opening statement for 5 minutes, beginning with the mayor.
Ranking Member Thompson, Representative Clark, Representative Pingree, Representative Carter. Thank you for coming to Biddeford. My name is Layton Fountain. I have the distinct honor and privilege as serving as the mayor of the city of Biddeford. Exactly 1 week after Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero was killed, I met with Johann's partner, Carolina, and Johann's sister, Daniela, at the corner of Hill and Pool Streets, less than 2 miles from here, where Johann was killed. They showed me a photograph of our city's newest playground, the J. Richard Community Center, where Johann was sitting in a swing with his 3-year-old daughter, Dulce. What struck me was how familiar it looked. A father with his daughter, a family making memories in our city at one of our public parks. And that joy has been taken from them forever. I want Congress to know his name. Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero. He came to Biddeford to build a life. He worked multiple jobs and was raising his daughter here. He was one of us. On July 13th, a federal immigration enforcement operation came into Biddeford and a federal officer shot and killed him. Federal officials have acknowledged that Johann was not the person agents were looking for and that the agents were not wearing body cameras. The next day, after Senator Susan Collins urged the Department of Homeland Security to halt non-urgent vehicle stops, DHS announced a nationwide pause. It lasted less than 24 hours. Now, funding Congress provided for body cameras may instead be spent on electric shock gloves. If Congress cannot hold ICE accountable, who can? On July 13th, federal agents left the scene. We remained. That is the part I need Congress and the colleagues on your committee to understand. A federal force came into my city, exercised one of the most extraordinary powers that governments possess, the use of deadly force, and left the consequences for Johann's family and for our city to carry. An arrest can be challenged, a removal order can be reviewed. A death, however, cannot be reversed. Not by Congress, not by a court, not by this committee. That is why the safeguards around deadly force should be the strongest we have. And yet, on the morning of July 13th, in my city, they were the weakest. Biddeford is a city of 23,000 people. We were left to absorb the aftermath of federal law enforcement operation without any federal support. Our police, fire, public works, schools, and community organizations have been stretched ever since. We secured the aftermath of a scene we were not permitted to investigate, responded to misinformation, and protected people's rights to gather, to mourn, to protest peacefully. We stood up mental health, crisis support, and food services, all without additional support. But what happened in Biddeford was not an isolated incident. From 2015 to 2025, at least 9 people were killed in shootings by Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents during vehicle stops. Since March of 2025, federal immigration agents have shot and killed at least 5 people. Johann Duran was the second person killed during a vehicle stop in a single week. And in both cases, the person killed was not the target of the enforcement action. So I asked Congress, what is the threshold? If an American citizen can be killed, if people who are not even the targets of enforcement can be killed, and if that is not enough to stop and examine these tactics and this agency, what is? I've spent the last month listening to Biddeford residents. They have different views on immigration. But I've heard the same thing again and again. What happened to Johan was wrong, and it should not have happened in our city or in any city across our country. At the same time, a part of my city has retreated entirely from public life. Immigrant residents, including people with legal status and pending asylum cases, are afraid to go about their daily lives. That fear affects public safety across Biddeford. Federal enforcement actions do not end when federal agents leave. Since July 13, no federal response mechanism has existed to help Biddeford address the fear, the trauma, the misinformation, the vandalism, the strain on local services that followed. The authority was federal. The burden has been local. I know the limits of my office. I understand Congress writes immigration law, and the Biddeford City Council does not. But when the laws you write and the budgets you approve bring federal power into our city, adequate safeguards and accountability must come with it. So I ask Congress for three things. First, justice for Johan and his family. When I met with Carolina a week after Johan's death, she asked me to bring that request directly to you. Justice for the life that was taken, for the family left behind, and for those responsible to be held accountable. Second, give us the truth about what happened on July 13th. Tell us who fired those shots, how that agent was vetted, trained, and supervised, and what standards governed the operation. And give Maine law enforcement everything they need to conduct a full and independent investigation. And third, require of federal agents what we require of our own local law enforcement. Humane treatment, body cameras, visible identification, clear use of force standards, no masks, and public accountability when any force is used. If our police department, operating on less than $10 million a year, can meet those standards, then the standards for immigration and customs enforcement with a multi-billion-dollar budget cannot be any lower. Congress cannot continue expanding the power without strengthening what restrains it. Because the conditions that produced what happened on July 13th still exist today in my city and in yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for not just your thoughtful testimony, but clearly it resonates with the committee, and I'm certain your recommendations and other things will become part of the public record, the recommendations. We'll now hear from Mr. Gideon. Now recognize Ms. Roche for 5 minutes. Coming back to you.
Thank you. Good morning, Ranking Member Thompson, Representative Pingree, Representative Clark, Representative Carter. My name is Sue Roche, and I'm the Executive Director of the Immigrant Legal Advocacy Project, or ILAP. ILAP is Maine's only statewide immigration legal services organization. For more than 30 years, we have ensured that Maine people can access immigration legal help, no matter how much money they have in their pocket. Johann Sebastian's death is a devastating tragedy felt by his family, the Biddeford community, and all of Maine. It was not an isolated incident. and it was not an accident. It was the direct and foreseeable result of deliberate federal policy choices rooted in racism and dehumanization. It's the only organization of our kind in the state with decades of experience. ILEP has been able to uniquely document ICE and Border Patrol activity and the unprecedented patterns of immigration enforcement that have been happening in Maine since early 2025. I have personally been with ILEP for 26 years, joining as its first staff attorney in 2000, and I have never seen anything like this. In 2025, enforcement patterns included high levels of collaboration between ICE, Border Patrol, and Maine's law enforcement. This typically involved Maine state and local law enforcement calling immigration officers to minor or pretextual traffic stops where they would arrest Maine residents and workers. We also documented incidents where immigration officers arrested people who had been in car accidents and people who had called 911 for help. None of this made Maine safe and left community members living in terror while draining our state's limited resources. In January of 2026, ICE descended in Maine in an operation they grotesquely called Catch of the Day, comparing the people of Maine to fish they could catch in a net. In a few days, hundreds of people were ripped from their families, communities, and Maine's workforce. ILEP responded to more than 70 requests for emergency legal help during that time period. We documented rampant racial profiling, ICE smashing windows, snatching people from their cars, grabbing them off sidewalks, stalking schools and grocery stores, arresting people at gunpoint, and other terrorizing and brutal behavior. ICE's violent tactics, let alone the use of deadly force, are unacceptable regardless of a person's immigration status. No one should lose their life or have their family member killed because they're an immigrant. That being said, ILEP has observed that the majority of Maine residents and workers who have been taken by ICE and Border Patrol since 2025 were in lawful immigration processes with no criminal background. This was the case with Johann Sebastian. He was a young father on his way to work. He was following a lawful process under US law. We have reviewed his documents and provided by his family and have confirmed that he had a pending asylum application. He was authorized to work in this country. He was following all the rules and going about a normal day when he was suddenly and viciously killed by ICE. Since the January operation, there have been ongoing high levels of ICE activity in Maine with a particular targeting of asylum seekers. ILEP is responding to arrests every day. So far this year, we have received approximately 350 requests for help through our detention project. ILEP's clients are not only afraid of being detained and deported, they're also afraid to send their children to school, to attend medical appointments, to seek higher education, to apply for new jobs, report crimes, or serve as witnesses. Everyone in Maine is harmed, and our state's entire future is dimmed when so many members of our community are living in fear and are unable to participate in public life. While we look to Johann Sebastian's family to tell us what some measure of justice looks like to them, some things are clear. First, the administration's mass deportation agenda has no legitimate public policy purpose. It harms all of us. Second, ICE is an imminent public safety threat and must get out of our communities now. The billions of dollars that have appropriated immigration enforcement are wholly unjustifiable. Congress should take all steps to defund and dismantle ICE and put those taxpayer dollars towards the public good. A just and humane immigration system is possible. Millions were left vulnerable to this extremist administration, and Congress must not delay anymore in creating a pathway to citizenship for all who call the United States home. Thank you for your crucial oversight work to hold ICE accountable for killing our beloved community member, Johann Sebastian. I look forward to your questions, and ILEP is here to be a resource in the work ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Like you were praying for me.
That resource. I will now hear from Mr. Gideon. Thank you, Ranking Member Thompson, Congresswoman Pingree, and all of the members of the committee. And thank you for holding this important hearing and for inviting us to testify. Thank you all for coming, supporting this really critical issue and for supporting the family. Before I begin, I just want to reflect on the courage that it took Dora and Omar to travel here after the killing of their son by federal agents in this country, to come here from Colombia to be with the family and the people that. You know, that's a fitting contrast. That courage is a nice contrast to the complete lack of courage, weakness, preying on victims and the most vulnerable that we see of the agents of our federal government who are carrying weapons on the public streets. Right? Thank you. It's clear to me from what I've learned about your son that your example of the courage and strength of character that you've demonstrated were taught to him and helped him become the man that he was. So I think you can at least be happy that you raised a very fine, young, and wonderful man. Now, as it was indicated, my name's Ben Gideon. I'm the lawyer that's been charged with the responsibility to represent the Duran Guerrero family and to seek accountability and justice for them for what happened. And I can assure you that we will do exactly that. Now, I grew up in the state of Maine. I practiced law here for more than 20 years, and I've never felt as sad or angry about any case or anything as I do about this case today. It literally makes me sick to my stomach that I have to be here and do this. It makes me so sad that an innocent 25-year-old young man with a beautiful partner, a beautiful 3-year-old daughter, with his whole life ahead of him, was killed for no reason. And it makes me angry, blood boiling angry, that he was killed by an intentional act of our federal government. It's a hard thing to square the concept of what America is or should be with the idea that our government is now killing innocent people on our streets. It would be one thing if this was just a single, unintentional, random act of violence committed by a single rogue agent. But this wasn't unintentional. It wasn't random. And responsibility for it is not limited to a single agent. Instead, what happened in Biddeford, Maine in the early morning hours of July 13 was the result of intentional policies and decisions made at the highest levels of our government to treat the killing of innocent people as acceptable collateral damage to a political agenda. We know it's not unintended or random because it keeps happening over and over again in Minnesota, in Houston, and now in Biddeford, Maine. We know it's not intended or random because there's no remorse, no apology, not even the slightest concern for those whose lives have been destroyed. And we know it's not unintended or random because there's been no effort to investigate the causes of what happened or to change anything or to stop it from happening again. It's been more than a month, 35 days, since Jon Sebastian was gunned down in his car on the way to work. the day after the shooting, Congresswoman Pingree and Maine's entire congressional delegation demanded an investigation. Yet to date, the Justice Department has done nothing to investigate. The FBI has done nothing to investigate. The Department of Homeland Security has done nothing to investigate. We have not heard from any of those agencies, not even once. That is unprecedented in this country. And it's terrible. But what's even worse is that instead of honestly seeking answers, our federal government blames the victim, hides and covers up information, and disseminates lies. Sadly, this has become the familiar playbook. To date, media reports that federal agents have shot and killed at least 11 people in the last year, including 4 shot and killed in motor vehicles like Johann Sebastian. They've shot more than 40 people. Each time they attempt to justify the shooting based on claims about the conduct of the person behind the wheel. And each time when evidence has emerged by video, the government's account proves false. Yet the government continues to put agents out on the streets without functioning body cameras to record their actions. It continues to justify killings, making claims about the victim, as it has tried to do here, without a single shred of evidence to support any of those claims. It's not enough that this government has needlessly taken this young father's life. Now it wants to destroy his reputation. They label him an illegal alien to dehumanize him, even though he was in this country lawfully and seeking and following all of the rules. Before he was shot and killed, nobody ever accused Johann Sebastian of doing anything wrong. No one ever accused him of committing any crime or violating any rule of the immigration process. Perhaps that's why, after they shot and killed him, the government had to admit that he wasn't even the target of their operations that morning. The government has stated that the target was someone else with a final order of removal. But now, as Congresswoman Pingree pointed out in her opening statement, the person whose vehicle to whom it was registered also had no final order of removal. So there was no lawful justification for stopping the car in the first place. And it's been more than a month since the killing, and the federal government has yet to tell us who was the lawful target of their operations that morning. I want to pause just for a moment to reflect on that. Our federal government shot and killed an innocent person. It was forced to admit that the person they shot and killed was not the target of their operation. And a month later, the government has still refused to tell us who the target of the operation actually was, or whether there was even any legitimate purpose of the operation at all that morning. The government has attempted to conceal the identity of the shooter. It refused to tell us to date when he was hired. Even to date, they haven't confirmed that he was employed by DHS or ICE. It never disclosed any of the problematic features of his past. What we know about the shooter's identity today, we know not because our government disclosed that information, but only from media reports. It's only through the media that we know about this agent's past. And what we've learned is shocking. We've learned that the agent who allegedly shot and killed Johann Sebastian had a long history of erratic behavior and violence, including threatening to kill one of his ex-wives and throwing boiling hot water on her while she was holding their 3-year-old daughter. We learned that he suffered from mental illness, that he made racist remarks, that he lied on his employment applications and was denied a job with a small town Maine police department. This is the individual that our government handed a gun and a badge to and put out on our streets to enforce our immigration laws. And they rushed him through without proper training. So recognizing that your Republican colleagues wouldn't come here today, which is sad. But I would hope that even in today's polarized climate, we can all agree that this individual was unfit to wield a deadly weapon under the authority of the federal government. I hope we can all agree that his existence in that role reflects a complete breakdown of any reasonable screening, hiring, or training process. I hope we can all agree that this goes beyond the conduct of one individual rogue agent to implicate those responsible for screening, hiring, training, and supervising this individual. And I hope we can all agree that any semblance of public trust going forward requires that changes be made so that nothing like this ever happens again. Now, the recent track record of our government and this agency give us no confidence that there will be any accountability or corrective action taken. This is why your oversight on this committee is so critical. With the participation of your colleagues, or if they refuse after a leadership change following the next election, ranking member Thompson becomes Chair Thompson, and that's coming right up, that this committee has the power to exercise oversight necessary to ensure accountability and reform. So on behalf of Johann Sebastian's family, we ask this committee to begin immediately to fulfill the critical oversight function. Specifically, we are calling on this committee to subpoena witnesses and documents to investigate the following specific issues. First, we ask that the committee determine what policies or practices of the agency allowed the agent who shot and killed Johann Sebastian to have been deemed fit to serve and hired in that position. Second, we ask that the committee identifies those responsible for hiring this agent and demand that they be held accountable. And third, we ask that the committee investigate what is behind the pattern of agents unlawfully shooting into motor vehicles and demand that this practice stop immediately before any other innocent person is killed. On behalf of Carolina, the entire Duran Guerrero family, thank you for holding this important hearing today. And if the future is as you hope it to be, I promise you it will be done. I now recognize Ms. Cheatham for 5 minutes of an opening statement.
Thank you. Good morning, Ranking Member Thompson, Representative Pingree, Representative Clark, Representative Carter, and members of Congress. My name is Mavalo Chitam, and I'm the Executive Director of the Maine River Rights Coalition, a statewide coalition of over 90 organizations. For more than 25 years, Merck has built relationships with immigrants across Maine. These relationships make us in so many ways the eyes and ears of the community. To understand what we're hearing today, you must first understand Maine. People come from our mountains, our coasts, and our small town. But people stay for something deeper, community. For immigrant families, this is part of what makes Maine home. And on July 13, something about that sense of home was shattered. Before Johann Sebastian Guerrero
was killed in Biddeford, people feared what an encounter with ICE would mean. After July 13th, their reality became all too clear. An encounter could mean you may never return home. A father left for an ordinary day and did not come home. Across Maine, families saw themselves in that story. They've seen masked agents shatter window cars, vehicles abandoned on the roadside, sometimes still running. They've watched as parents grappled on how to get their children to and from school safely. And on that fateful day, we all collectively shared in the fear that a mistaken identity could result in our death. This is what rushed training, no standards, no accountability, enforcement looks like in Maine. And then there was an empty chair at the dinner table left behind. This is what immigration enforcement looks like from the community side. We tell immigrants, follow the rules, go to work, attend your appointments, make every deadline. Wait while your case moves through a system that can take years. Then we ask them to live normally, even though the beginning and end of their day can become two completely different worlds. Some people calculate risk ordinarily. Is it safe to go to work? Can I safely take my kids to work, to school? What happens if I miss that doctor's appointment or that blood test again? Merck hears that fear through our immigrant defense hotline. When enforcement happens, the hotline rings. The week of Johan's death, it rang 128 times. People called asking, was that ICE? Is it safe to leave my home? What happens to my children if something happens to me? What began as a trusted information sharing has become a statewide network of referral, legal connections, housing assistance, and community response. The arrest may take minutes, but the disruption takes months. ICE on data tells another part of that story. Merck's analysis has found that 79% of people apprehended in Maine in 2024 and 2025 had no criminal conviction. Yet, this expansion of enforcement has been justified in the name of public safety. The government's own data tells us what we're witnessing in Maine is mission drift. Johan's death cannot simply be dismissed as one officer's isolated failure. Reports that ICE is investing 20 million for electrified gloves underscores the urgent need for immediate congressional action to further prevent predictable harm. The culture of impunity and the normalization of violence and death must be addressed. There should be no tolerance for lack of accountability or meaningful guardrails when federal officials demonstrate a clear pattern of violating the law. Congress should end the unchecked expansion of ICE, stop broad community enforcement operations like those we're seeing in Maine, and reconsider which functions should continue, if at all. The billions committed to expanding detention enforcement should instead help to build a functional immigration system. With enough judges, officers, legal capacity, and resources to decide cases fairly and on time, a system where following the process actually means something. If an agency has drifted from its stated mission, Congress should not reward it with more money and more power. Maine will keep doing what Maine does. We will answer the hotline. We will cover shifts. We will check on each other's neighbor. But a resilient and connected community cannot clean up the consequences of a broken federal policy. Johan should have come home on July 13th. Thank you for bringing the oversight to Maine. Merck stands ready to continue bringing to Congress what we see and hear as you pursue accountability and change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cheatham, for your powerful words. I now recognize Ms. Crum for statements for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Ranking Member Thompson, Representative Pingree, Representative Clark, and Representative Carter. My name is Crystal Cron, and I'm a mother, daughter, sister, and lifelong resident of Maine. I am the founding director of Presente Maine, a grassroots organization by and for the Latina peoples of Maine. Presente works to bridge gaps in healthcare, nutrition, housing, safety, and other basic needs, while also advocating for safer, more equitable policies and practices to meet the needs of all Maine people. I want to begin today by reminding us that Johann Sebastian's death was preventable. Every death in the hands of ICE is preventable. The question before us is, do we have the courage and political will to protect and defend the lives of everyone in our communities? To say we are heartbroken does not convey the depth of exhaustion, terror, or grief we have felt since July 13th. Over the last month, our team has had the privilege of mourning and learning alongside Johann's family. I learned that Johann was loving and hardworking. He often worked 6 or 7 days a week, from sunrise to when his child was in bed. He came to this country with a dream to live a dignified life with his family. His murder was a final act of violence in a life lived under oppressive conditions designed to strip him of his dignity and steal his humanity. Workers across Maine see themselves in Johann. For years, Presente has worked alongside seafood, agricultural, hospitality, and construction workers who are central to Maine's economy. These industries flourish because of migrant labor, while migrant workers are too often underpaid, exploited, and forced to work extraordinary hours. Thousands of people labor to sustain the economy we celebrate as the pride and joy of Maine, while living under the constant threat of detention, deportation, and death. In processing plants just one town over from where we sit today, migrants shuck and pack lobster meat piecemeal at 40 cents a pound, while that same lobster goes to market for $60 a pound. While beautiful beaches and parks surround us, immigrant families have limited time for rest and recreation. We live under an economic and carceral system that deems some lives more valuable than others. This violence did not emerge overnight. It has been built over decades through policing, detention, and deportation systems that deprive people of their freedom, isolate them from their communities, and hold them in subhuman conditions. Over the last year, families have feared going to the grocery store, dropping off kids at school, and seeking medical care because immigration enforcement has made ordinary life dangerous. In January, we received a tip that ICE was coming to Maine in unprecedented numbers. We watched what was happening in Chicago and Minneapolis. We knew horror was coming. So we did what we were practiced in. We told our community to shelter in place. Since 2020, we have built systems to help our neighbors survive crises. We grow and deliver culturally appropriate food. We support people with rent. We provide accompaniment and transportation to critical medical appointments. We do the work of keeping one another alive. On January 21st, we received the first report that multiple agents were circling a family home in a residential neighborhood in Portland. Over the next several days, hundreds of immigration police tore through our neighborhoods, abducting parents like Joanne. Agents claimed they were targeting criminals. Instead, they indiscriminately snatched people off the streets, profiling them based on appearance alone. Many who were abducted, like Joanne, were not immigration targets. Agents pulled guns on nonviolent observers practicing their First Amendment rights, followed people home who documented ICE activity, and intimidated our neighbors. Advocates warned that it was a matter of time before ICE murdered someone in our streets. David Roulette's murder of Jon Sebastian Duran Guerrero could and should have been prevented. Roulette must be held accountable, but accountability for one person cannot allow us to ignore the violence and dehumanization inherent to ICE's policing and detention system. Johan's death is not an isolated tragedy. It is part of a system that has inflicted fear, separation, detention, and death on immigrant communities. The responsibility for his death and the many deaths by the immigration police and in ICE detention this year is a collective one. Maine people have been clear about what is needed. ICE out of Maine, ICE out from everywhere. The abolishment of ICE and all immigration policing is one of many steps towards repair. It is not the last. Today, Vicente is calling on Congress to pass Congresswoman Ramirez and Congresswoman Clark's Melt ICE Act to end DHS's funding to detain and monitor immigrants and to reinvest those funds into services that support life. We ask you to mourn and grieve Joan Sebastian's life by abolishing ICE and ending all funding for immigration policing. We will not let this death be reduced to a footnote in this administration's enforcement statistics. There is no freedom until everyone is free. Thank you.
I thank the panel of witnesses for their powerful testimony. Each member will have 5 minutes to question the panel, and I'll begin by recognizing myself for questions. Mr. Mayor, the Trump administration's cruel and violent immigration enforcement actions have deeply affected communities nationwide, including your own. How has the horrific killing of Mr. Guerrero and ICE's ongoing presence in your community impacted you?
Thank you, Ranking Member Thompson. It has devastated our city. As I mentioned in my testimony, we have individuals living here, law-abiding citizens who are retreating from public life. They're not going to work. They're not sending their kids to school. I've met recently with a family in the neighborhood very close to where Johann Sebastian was killed. A mother, her 2 kids, one ready to go to kindergarten, but will not be attending kindergarten this fall because cannot fathom what type of message that would send if those kids came home and not to a mother or a father. They see an example of what happened to Johann Sebastian and can't fathom what it would be to their own family. That's the devastation that we see in our community among particular immigrant neighbors.
Thank you. Mr. Gidding, you've stated that you're looking to file a lawsuit against the US government over the killing of Mr. Guerrero due to the conduct of the government and the officers being unreasonable.
Yeah.
For those who aren't aware and might be listening in, can you explain why the officers' actions that day were unreasonable? I'll try to give a brief primer. This is turned on. Can you hear me? Okay.
There's only one very narrow circumstance in which it's lawful to shoot somebody in a motor vehicle, and that's if the officer is at imminent risk of severe bodily injury or death at the moment that shot is fired. And each shot, there are 5 shots here, is separately evaluated under that scale. And it's a very, very difficult standard to meet, because if you can even avoid the issue by simply moving out of the way, you're not allowed lawfully to shoot and kill somebody in a motor vehicle. So in fact, the DHS has a policy against doing this very thing. When this first happened, we heard statements that they were shooting to prevent the vehicle from fleeing the scene. That is unlawful. That's not a legitimate rationale for shooting into a motor vehicle. We then heard later that the shooting was done because Johann Sebastian, quote unquote, weaponized the vehicle. That's the line they've used in other cases, like the Renee Good and Alex Freddie case. But in each case where video emerges, it demonstrates that that was not in fact the case. And based on what we've seen of the evidence in this case, it wasn't the case here either. But that would be the only reason why you could shoot somebody in a moving vehicle. I should also point out that you also have to have a lawful rationale for stopping the vehicle to begin with. And we also don't believe that occurred here. Just to say one more point about that, we are also currently representing another Colombian immigrant named Juan Sebastian Carvajal Nunez, who was abducted on the Catch of the Day operation, January 22nd. He was also not the target of the investigation that day. He was also wrongfully abducted and taken into ICE custody, and that case is currently pending in federal court in Maine. So this is not even the first time that our federal ICE agents have wrongfully targeted a Colombian immigrant in the state of Maine.
Thank you. My last question, Mr. Mayor, given your understanding of the agent that we believe who killed Mr. Guerrero, is it your belief that had that person applied for employment to your police department, what would he have, what would you have done?
Based on what we've read, which again, I think as Mr. Gideon shared, is not information that's coming from the federal government, but from the media. The information about this individual would never have been hired or considered by the Biddeford Police Department. I spoke with our police chief. When any applicant comes through our process, we end up with roughly a 40 to 50 page dossier of that individual. We interview family, we look at bank records, financial records. It is a high bar, multiple interviews, polygraph tests. I can't imagine if what has been written about that individual is true, that they would have ever ended up with a badge and a gun in the Biddeford Police Department.
Well, thank you, and I've completed my listing of questions, but there's a letter signed by every Democratic member of Congress asking for this information and a lot of other information around this incident. And it's dated July 15th. And to this day, we've not received a response from the Homeland Security Secretary, nor at that time the acting ICE director, that we will pursue it. I assure you.
Thank you.
Madam Whip.
Thank you, Ranking Member Thompson. I want to start with you, Mayor LaFountain, and thank you for your testimony. I have such a mix of deep sadness and absolute rage that, excuse the emotion in my voice. But I think that you really show the kind of leadership that we need in this moment. When you said, not only the actions that you've taken, but a simple phrase that you used, one of us, one of us. And that is the fundamental promise of Biddeford, of Maine, of the United States of America, that you can come here and build a life and work hard and raise your kids. And that was what was taken away. So thank you for being that leader who's standing up to the divide that we are being, people are trying to sell, that there is an otherism that isn't one of us. And I deeply appreciate you and your leadership. I also am interested in the use of body cams for the Biddeford police. We talked that you probably wouldn't have hired this ICE officer. In fact, I think he was rejected from another Maine police department. But what other standards and training did you see that the Biddeford police have certainly adopted and are held to that were not present in July?
Thank you, Representative Clark. Biddeford Police Department is one of just 5% of police agencies in the entire country that is CALIA certified, which is one of the highest certifications that any law enforcement agency can have. It means that we have been validated by independent assessors. I would ask if you bring back to your colleagues, is Immigration and Custom Enforcement, are they validated by independent assessors? Our Biddeford Police Department is. We were recertified as of July of 2026. We've been certified and accredited since July of 2018. As it relates to body cams, all of our officers wear body cams. They have for nearly a decade. And as I reminded you, we have a budget of less than $10 million a year for a Biddeford Police Department, and yet are able to equip them with the equipment that provides not just accountability for the officers, but protection for liability for the city and for residents that they interact with on a daily basis. That's the standard we hold on.
My next question is for the lawyers on our panel, Ms. Roach, Mr. Gideon. Is overstaying a visa a criminal act?
No, overstaying, thank you for the question, Representative. Overstaying a visa is a civil infraction, and I think that's something really important to remember here, that what we're talking about is basically paperwork problems. These are civil immigration issues, and they don't merit a militarized response with masked armed. I think if we had, like, for example, missed a deadline for our tax filing or not registered our car, we certainly would not respect this type of response.
Thank you. Mr. Gideon, is due process only open to citizens in this country?
No, it isn't.
How about warrant requirements?
No.
Thank you. Ms. Roach, access to courts and legal representation is so fundamental to a strong democracy and the rule of law. It's a little off topic, but here in Maine, what have you seen as far as budgets for legal aid, especially coming from federal support?
Well, certainly. I mean, one thing that's really important to know in immigration context is because it is civil, there is no constitutional right to an attorney. So there is no government-funded attorney in an immigration case. It really relies upon either someone being able to afford an attorney or a legal services organization. And in Maine, ILEP is the only organization that is able to represent people in immigration court for free.
Yeah. And have you seen budget cuts?
Well, our funding is all private, and primarily we get state funding as well, but there are, I think, a lot of organizations are seeing cuts. We don't get federal funding, so we have not received federal.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Ms. Crum, thank you for your testimony. And thank you for raising something also fundamental to all of this, and that is the tie of immigrants to not only our communities, as Ms. Cheatham pointed out so beautifully, but also to our economy. And that often there is a hierarchy of wages and work that has a role here. What have you seen with this sort of reckless immigration enforcement as far as the impacts on families' economies and the economy of Maine and Biddeford overall?
Thank you for the question. One, thinking back to January and people sheltering in place for 2 weeks, people's personal economies and livelihoods are still being impacted. Even after the so-called surge with escalated operations, people continue to shelter in place for weeks or months after. People work seasonally in lobster, May to December. That means that many people didn't go to work even when the season started. I think also it impacts our small local businesses that depend on immigrant labor. I mentioned lobster, but also construction, hospitality, all the industries that, you know, people love to come to Maine for. The vacation land, those rely on immigrant labor. And I think we continue to see shortages in at businesses, you know, saying they can't hire workers. But how can they expect us to go out and fill those jobs if they're not sure? Not just that we'll be detained and taken away from our families, but even killed.
Thank you. And briefly, my last question, Ms. Cheatham, can you describe a little bit, you talked so eloquently about coming to Maine because of community. What has the killing of Johann Sebastian and all of this mass deportation done to that sense of security, not only for our immigrant community, but also for communities at large here?
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman, for that question. You know, like I said, you know, we come to Maine because of the peace, you know, security and being able to raise your family. And what has happened, you know, people are thinking twice about Maine, but it's also just the community here. We were visiting some farmers, immigrant farmers over this week, and they're growing, you know, vegetables, growing ethnic community, you know, vegetables that the community, you know, rely on during summer. And there's so much food there, and people can't come out because they don't feel safe. So that daily, you know, chores, go out, you know, get your ethnic vegetables, go, you know, take your kids, you know, to playground, just daily normal life. You know, that just sense of security has just been taken away. And so we're living a very normal, you know, summer, and people are just sheltered in place. And so, you know, that just takes away, you know, that whole sense of normalcy.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. We're now hear from a gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Thank you for the family and the courage that you exhibit to be able to stand. As a father with 2 sons, I can only imagine the pain that you're feeling. To the governor, mayor, to my esteemed colleagues on the dais with me, to all the leaders to this incredible community, community of love, I can see, a community of concern and passion, I can see. A filled auditorium on a Monday when you can be doing and should be doing a whole lot other things, but you chose to be here to show your support, your concern. We've traveled far to be here. to support your outstanding member of Congress, who's doing an incredible job in the people's house and has done an incredible job of bringing your pain to the nation's capital. So this life is not lost in vain, that we're able to learn from it, to hear from you, to take your comments back to Congress, to demonstrate that the American people are tired of this. We're tired of it. We're tired of Trump. We're tired of the simple avoidance, ignoring, and dismantling of our democracy. The battering of the guardrails of our checks and balances, and the complete disregard for rule of law. Human life and human rights should matter. But it doesn't with them. It matters with us, it matters with you. That's why we have to speak loud.
Yeah.
We have to show up. We have to demand accountability. And I realize that I'm preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
But as I've been told before, even the choir needs rehearsal. We're here not just to listen. We're here to take back your comments, your concerns, and to lay it flat on the laps of our Republican counterparts who seem to ignore what's happening. Their heads are in the sand. People are dying, have died. Stuck somewhere. But we want to take this opportunity to hope and pray that this is the last such hearing we ever have to have. Amen. We're gathered at this shadow hearing to unfortunately discuss yet another tragic death at the hands of an ICE officer, an outcome fueled by the dangerous rhetoric and reckless policies of the Trump administration. I'm horrified by this administration's dangerous, violent, and deadly immigration enforcement activities that are backed by billions of dollars provided by the Congressional Republicans. No one is safe from these violent activities. I share in my colleagues' comments, Mr. Mayor, and thanking you for using the words "one of us." Because as she said so eloquently, that really defines what this is about. Us against them. Us who believe in a constitution against them who don't. Us who recognize human life matters against those who don't. Us who recognize that love and unity is better than hate and division. So yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for acknowledging one of us matters. It seems like every day we see a news story about federal immigration agents assaulting people, citizens and non-citizens alike. We're witnessing in our communities is not public safety, but an assault on humanity itself. Border Patrol and ICE agents have entered their neighborhoods with no transparency, no meaningful coordination with local officials. They're militarized forces who are not trained in our local laws or community-based de-escalation techniques and who did not understand the communities or the people they're operating among. This is a recipe for fear, confusion, and dangerous outcomes. Mr. Chairman, the testimonies that we heard today will be essential for us to take back and use as a part of our congressional oversight responsibilities. We will use what we've heard to investigate these operations and to demand answers and to hold this administration accountable. If not now, in 4 months. Mr. Mayor, as it was mentioned, our illustrious ranking member, soon to be chair again. That's right, you got that. Many of us began our careers in local government, so we know the challenges that you have. So I've got a question: how cooperative have they been in sharing information with you? And how difficult has it been? I asked that for a question for a reason, because I wanted on the record to be able to use this again as to what happens in some communities and what doesn't happen, what happens in others.
As it pertains to federal law enforcement agencies,
This particular situation, we have not had any communication from those agencies. Been fortunate to hear from our elected representatives, including Congresswoman Pingree. But as it pertains to the individual departments and their leadership, none whatsoever. Ms. Roche, can you describe how the Trump administration's mass deportation agenda is threatening the civil rights and civil liberties, including migrants and U.S. citizens?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, so Johann Sebastian's death is really the direct result of this administration's mass deportation campaign. And the way they're doing that is they're really implementing it in a number of ways, starting with just a barrage of really inhumane policies that are really trying to strip away people's ability to gain or retain legal status, and also enforcement measures that are really trying to create a climate of fear and chaos and confusion, so that even those who are not being deported and even those who have a lawful process that they can follow are choosing to not follow that because they're so fearful and are trying to self-deport. This is also really, as you've mentioned, the result of the so much funding and appropriations, billions and billions of dollars that are funding this activity. And it also is really a result of years of failed attempts to really have comprehensive immigration reform. And so what we've been left is with this system that the administration has been able to manipulate in order to unleash this immoral and inhumane mass deportation campaign. And it's causing deaths like Johann's and others. And we just have to ask, how many more deaths are we willing to accept before we stop this?
It should have been this wrong. You run agencies or operate agencies that provide services. How much of an uptick have you seen in the amount of calls of service since this administration had unleashed this reckless and hateful process?
Thank you. So we have seen since 2026 inbound phone calls on the hotline 13,918.
In what time frame?
This is for 2026 from January. And our outbound, this is us calling back people, is about 4,000. And so the total of almost 18,000 phone calls that we've seen in the hotline.
And that's just the first 8 months.
That's just, yes.
I wanted to touch on the main solidarity fund, which was designed to pay legal fees and bonds for immigrants who have been victims of immigration enforcement. Since September of 2025, we've raised and spent $1.8 million, the majority of that on bonds. When we started to support people with bond, they were $1,500, $3,000, or $5,000. Now we regularly pay $20,000 to $30,000 bond. And that's on top of, increased needs for housing support, food support, medical care, and just a huge burden on families themselves and on organizations like ours, because now we can't just support and facilitating those services, but people need direct accompaniment and transportation to each and every appointment because they're terrified to go by themselves.
Thank you. And for the people that are not just the ones in this auditorium, people who are and will be watching this, what advice or instruction would you give someone if they find themselves encountering one of these rule officers? Because it's important that while we know we have civil liberties that we should be, and by every part of our constitution should be protected, but we do know that there are violators who don't care. So what advice would you give someone when encountering one of these rule officers? And I'll tell you, I've got two sons. And I tell my kids, if you are encountered by a rogue officer, remain calm. Make it home alive. Daddy, fix it tomorrow. But you got to get home alive because you can't uncrack a skull. And unfortunately, you can't bring back a life. So what preventive measure might you share with this audience, anyone else, on how we can make it home alive and deal with it tomorrow?
Representative Carter, that's just such an important question. I wish I had a clear and easy answer for you. What I would say is that, I mean, you obviously want to do as little as possible to try to escalate things, like you say, just go along and try to survive until the next day so that you can pursue your lawful legal process. The other case that we have for the Colombian immigrant in this country, whose name happens to be Juan Sebastian Carnival Munoz. He was here on an H-1B visa. He's the engineer, I think you alluded to, Representative Pingree, who was taken into custody on the catch of the day, January 22nd. And he was here, he got his master's degree from the University of Maine in civil engineering. And then he was working, repairing our roads and bridges in the state. In fact, he's still here doing that today. But on January 22nd, he was stopped by ICE agents. He immediately offered to show them his real ID, which he did. He put the real ID right up to the window to show the agents they had a real ID, which you can only get if you're lawfully in this country and have a visa. They disregarded that, bashed in the window with a crowbar, and hauled him out of his vehicle while it was still running. His cell phone fell to the ground, and they cuffed him and put him into a vehicle and began to drive him around. They then, within a short period of time, understood that there was no lawful basis to have abducted him, and they didn't care. They still continued to hold him and brought him down to a holding facility in Burlington, Massachusetts. He didn't resist. He went along with it. He offered to show his immigration papers, which he had in his possession. They declined to look at them. And 15 hours later, they let him go. That strikes me as about the best you can do under these current conditions. He's alive today. And none of that should have ever happened to him. If that were your son, I'm sure you'd be extremely angered about it, as he and his family are, but maybe that's the best we can hope for under the current circumstances.
With all due respect, the onus should not be on the individual. The onus should be on our leaders and our government. With all due respect, don't blame the victim. We should not be asking what people can do to prevent themselves from being murdered by our government.
As I said when I started, look, we're trying to get to the facts of what occurred, just so we can fix the problem. Sometimes getting to the facts is hurtful, but we have to get to the facts. If our Republican colleagues will not come and face the public, then Democrats will come. And when we come, we'll get the hard facts, we'll ask the difficult questions, but we have to get to the facts so we can get to the ultimate solution. I understand the impact of, people in the audience. Probably, that same feeling is among us at this table. But we are obligated to get to the facts and ask the questions, so I appreciate the audience indulgence in letting us get, to the facts.
My time is, sorry, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me, recognize for the final, questions, the lady who, brought us to where we are today. I appreciate, her setting this up and going forward. But it's a tough situation. We cried with the family, before the hearing. And so these are moments that no one should look forward to, but they occur. And we are taking an oath to do our job. I think this is part of what we do. So I'll now yield to the young lady who brought us here, Representative Penn.
Thank you, Carol. And thank you again, to everyone for being here, to everyone in the audience, thank you for your willingness to take your own time to be here today, for your thoughts, and we wholeheartedly support so many of the things that you have sent to us and that I know you've written on cards and that you've shouted out to us. We agree on it all. And I really want to thank again, my colleagues. There's a term that we use in committees when, especially if a lot of people have already asked questions, and we've heard so many good questions from my colleagues, we say, I want to associate myself with everyone else's remarks and everyone else's questions. Because there's another term, and it's everything has been asked, but not everyone has asked it. So I'm just going to do the indulgence. I will not repeat all of the wonderful things they've already asked of the witnesses in respect for everyone's time, but I do really appreciate the time they took to understand better the situation that we have here in Maine, what went on exactly here in Biddeford, and the work that they're doing across the country. The members of this committee and the members of our leadership in Congress are putting in a tremendous amount of time. We hold 215 seats in this current Congress, and all 215 haven't come today, but I hope this gives you a sense of the amazing people I serve with and their dedication and concern about what's going on and their willingness to fight back. And we will not stop that fight until we are back in the majority and can do everything we possibly can to stop this law that they've been. And to the family, to the governor, to the witnesses today, you've just done an extraordinary job. And I am so fortunate not only to represent the First District of Maine, but to work with the incredible people, the constituents who show up for things like this and who I know are fighting back. You're standing on the streets, you're holding the signs, you're letting everyone know that these are profound problems that no community or no state should have to suffer, and you're not going to take it anymore. And I thank you so much for that. We had a room full of elected officials, local representatives, city council members, state senators, people who don't even represent this district but wanted to be here. And I have the extraordinary privilege of working with them and chatting with all of you and seeing you at the rallies and knowing how much you are showing up for your communities. I'm just so grateful to be able to work in these horrendous times with good people who care so much. So thank you for all of that and all that all of you are doing, which is really the work that carries on every single day. And I've had access to all of our witnesses, and my staff does too. And just thank you. You've been in communication with us, not just since July 13th, but forever. And I have an amazing team that works for the individuals and works against these horrendous policies. And we couldn't do our work without you. So please know how grateful I am to be able to come from a state where there are amazing people, and many more in this room who are doing this work every day. Thank you. And I think we should all appreciate really how lucky we are to be Maine. My colleagues would tell you this doesn't happen in every state. You don't have in every state elected officials who show up and care about the truth, or a governor will show up, or an attorney general who's investigating. They just came from Texas, an investigation. I feel quite confident you didn't see the same thing. We should really be saying, can't we abolish Texas? Sorry. But I just want to take my time to ask each of you, one of the things I wanted to make sure happened, and you all have done it brilliantly, is to make sure that my colleagues heard that as just horrific as this incident was, a lot has led up to this. And this is part of people's daily lives in Maine. Whether you're an employer wondering why people can't come to work anymore, you're a neighbor wondering why your neighbors don't go out, kids in school who are seeing their classmates not showing up, just it's in everyone's lives. And these are our friends and neighbors. So I just want to ask each of you if there's something that you didn't get a chance to tell us that will help inform the fight that we're in, and the just deep battles you're all fighting every single day. And Crystal, I'll start at your end, and I appreciate so much that you talked a little bit about the work you're doing to help people post their bond. I think most people don't realize that it's not just, that you get picked up and then you try to find a lawyer. You also have to find the resources to just get yourself back home, if that's even possible. So what didn't people hear that you think it's really critical for them to know?
Yeah, I just want to re-emphasize, as I said in my opening statement, that the work of preparing for this moment began in January 2025. We knew then that something like this was coming and that we couldn't wait to see what would happen before we started planning. We worked alongside many of the partners at this table, with ILAP, with other attorneys, to get people power of attorneys. What will you do if this happens? God forbid it happens, but where are your kids going to go? How will you access money? How will your family defend you? So asking many of those questions ahead of time, establishing the hotline, how would we refer people to services? Where do people call? Where do people get information? Establishing the Maine Solidarity Fund. We knew that people wouldn't be able to pay bonds in other states. People get arrested, they're there for months or forever, awaiting deportation proceedings and there for years, not able to access lawyers, not be able to have contact with their family. One of the successes, although horrible, that even one person was taken from our community, most have been able to come home because of being able to access legal fees and bonds. We've seen hundreds of people be able to return to us. We've talked to advocates in other states, like Chicago, like in Minneapolis, where thousands have been taken. They say that most, all of them have not come home. So that's been a critical resource. Training community members to be observing and exercising their First Amendment rights. As I said, we had many people in the streets watching the terror that was happening. They were followed to their homes. They were punished for looking out for everyone, but that took months and months of training people, reminding all of us that we do have rights, though we're being terrorized for exercising those. So training, across the state, not just in this area, and having the supportive community at our back. Yeah, I think that,
Thank you.
that's that. Though it horrifies me what's happening in our community, it's also seeing the strength of community, as Mufala said, is giving me the strength, and know that we can carry forward this work. So thank you for asking.
Thank you so much for doing it, and also for reminding us that ICE is also going after the people who are legally protesting and exercising their right of free speech, which includes many of you I know, and thank you for doing that. It's so important to stand up as American citizens for what's right. So one of the things we hear so much is people who don't understand the depth of the challenges that people are going through in our state, and they say, well, if you're here illegally, they should pick you up. And I think people don't understand final removal orders or overstaying a visa in this complex process that should absolutely be reformed. But can you talk a little bit about that, or anything else you think we haven't heard enough about today?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Representative Pingree. Thank you all for having this here today. I think it is so important for us to focus on the individuals who are being impacted by this larger mass deportation regime, because really the intent is to try to normalize things and to try to create so much chaos and confusion and fear that we're just not pushing back. And so recognizing the individuals who are impacted is so important, and that's something we see every day at ILAP. We've helped 72 people get released from detention just this year. And when I when you get there, I didn't think we had people to change in the entire time I was working at ILAB. Regarding orders of removal, I think that is really, I mean, one thing I do want to just stress again, I think we've already heard that Johan did not have a final order of removal. ICE did claim that the person they were looking for had a border final removal. We've heard from you today, that's not the case, which really aligns with this continuous lies and continuous trying to make it sound like someone with a final order of removal is justifying their violent actions, which it wouldn't, regardless of what somebody's immigration status is. It is a civil violation, and even in a criminal justice system, we don't treat people, we don't have a militarized armed force going out with masks and in unmarked vehicles. And so in terms of final order of removal, I think it is really also important to remember that people have legal rights, regardless of whether or not they're in legal status, whether they have an order of final removal. Our Constitution protects people from unlawful government force, regardless of your immigration status. And someone with a final order of removal may actually not be required to leave the country. For example, there are cases where an immigration judge may have granted something called withholding of removal for protection under the Convention Against Torture, which actually prohibits the government from deporting that individual. There also may be a means to reopen your case. For example, we've been seeing recently what's being called mega master hearings, where immigration courts are scheduling large hearings with large groups of people who all have a hearing together at once. And what they're doing is they're sending out notices to reschedule hearings that were already scheduled, and they're scheduling them for earlier dates. Sometimes people aren't, and multiple notices. Sometimes people are getting those notices after the date of the court hearing, so they're getting ordered deported in absentia, and then they have a final order of removal. However, they have a legal means to try to move to reopen their case. Somebody also might have a change of circumstances where their country changes, there's been a change in country conditions, and they now face fear if they go home. So they could now reopen their case to apply for asylum. There are a lot of different ways that people may have a lawful process, even though they haven't ordered of final removal. But I think it is important for us just to remember, like, every human has constitutional rights, and this administration is trying to make us forget that, and they're trying to numb us so that we turn a blind eye. And I'm really happy that you're doing this here today, because it's a really important step towards that. Thank you so much for your. Like, your work is so important to people in Maine. What haven't we covered today that is, you just want to make sure my colleagues here?
Yeah.
Thank
Until I
Go ahead.
Thank you, thank you. I think one thing I want to say is ICE never left our state. And as we speak, ICE is still picking people. And what we've noticed that it's happening not just in Biddeford, but throughout the county. You know, our records are showing we have almost 2,000 arrests just in the last, since August, in January, from January to August. So when we hear the operation has ended, our hotline is able to pick every, and my staff is here, every 2 weeks, there's a change in strategy. And so the tactics are changing, but people are still being picked up, like drop by drop. So it may come out, like we saw in the Biddeford the last 3 weeks, and then we saw at the court. So there's strategy, and we're able to using the hotline, we're able to see those changing tactics. And in our state, there hasn't been any stop. And it's happening throughout all the 16 counties. Yes, it is concentrated in Cumberland and your county as the next, highest number. So this trickle in, picking people bit by bit, feels like, we've stopped. Oh, they've stopped arrests. No, they don't. And in Maine, we're just seeing that continue. It changes every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, and people are being picked up. And as Crystal has said, we're running out of, immigrant, funding that is supporting these people. Came from the $20 or people who are some of who are here, the $10, the $5, we don't have, support as Sue has shared. And so that is being, this whole operation is being lifted by the community at large. And so we thank you for coming. We thank the community for helping us, take people out of detention with their $20 and $10. And thank you, Mayor, for supporting us during this time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your work. Mr. Mayor, anything that the city of Biddeford and that you want us to hear that hasn't come up today?
Thank you. And I believe, thank you, Representative Pingree, and thank you for organizing this gathering and bringing it here to our city where you can hear directly from the people of Biddeford and the organizations that have supported our residents throughout these terrible last few months. One thing I'd like to highlight and remind the ranking member as a former mayor, elected officials at the local level are the closest to the community. We are the neighbors and the people who are asking us to do more, to be supportive of our community, to respond. And we need the tools to be able to do that. Your federal authority supersedes our own, supersedes our state authority. Our state has taken action, our city has tried to take action, but it's the federal level ultimately that has the authority that we look to keep us safe. Right now, that's not what's happening. We are exploring, my office has had to have conversations with the mayor's office in Minneapolis, in Houston, in Chicago. That's not a position we should have to be in, to have to look to the expertise of other cities who are dealing with the same national issue, that these cities become targets. I think that makes it all the more crystal clear that this is a federal problem that we need a federal solution for and federal accountability.
Can we just wholeheartedly agree, and then we'll go to Ben, and I agree with the woman in the back who earlier said, this onus shouldn't be on the individuals. You all shouldn't have to be helping individual families, or individuals shouldn't have to be posting bond or getting lawyers, or dealing with civil and criminal cases as you are helping them on with today. This really is a responsibility of Congress, of the appropriate who gave so much money to these agencies, of Congress who is charged with the oversight of these agencies and everything that they're doing, whether it's the private detention centers, the electric glove and shock gloves, all the things that they want to do in any normal era. And my colleagues, who many have served longer than me, would say this was always the kind of thing that would come before Congress, and this oversight would go to us. But as we've said too many times, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have not exerted that responsibility of oversight. And we intend to make sure we get there eventually, and we are here today to fight for that. So I appreciate you're here representing an individual family, but is there anything that didn't come before us today that you also want to make sure is included?
Yeah, so when Representative Clark asked me the question of what I would advise individuals to do if confronted with a situation like this, I took the question literally and analyzed it as a lawyer would, but in trying to search my mind for what I would advise somebody. And someone in the audience rightfully called me out, perhaps. What's interesting about this whole process and why it feels so surreal to so many of us, I think, is because we're operating on a legal and a rational framework in a world where that is quickly disappearing. And the fiction that's been entertained is that there's any problem whatsoever that ICE is here to solve. There's no problem at all. We heard from the mayor of this city where immigrants have been for decades integrated seamlessly into the community and are being loved and valued by the community. You've heard from community service representatives who speak to how the immigrant community adds value to our state and our economy. There's literally no problem. And so you start with the framework that you as elected representatives and government officials generally the process is identify problem, seek solution, but that's not what we all know that's not what's happened here. It's what's going on is that the immigration policies are dictated entirely by political ends that have nothing to do with the facts on the ground. And so there can be sort of when we're having a rational conversation about an irrational world, it can sort of feel like we're all rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, and nobody here has the power to change the course of that Titanic. We hope that changes, but hope hasn't proven all that effective in recent years. So the one thing that I take away from this incident with this remarkable young man and his family is that when you look at the course of history, sometimes there are events, we call them inflection points, that focus the mind on something that's so wrong, so inhumane, and needs to be, and where change needs to happen, that it finally pushes that needle in the right direction so that a society can change. And I think with respect to Johann Sebastian and his family, the person he was as such a wonderful human being, so much goodness and so much character, and the contrast between the individual ICE officer of somebody of such low character, creates an opportunity maybe that this could serve as an inflection point going forward. And I very much hope that it does. And that's why I think it's really so, despite the frustration we all have being here and having these discussions, I think it's so critically important that you came here to do this today. So thank you.
On behalf of members assembled as well as Democrats on the Homeland Security Committee, let me thank our witnesses. Let me thank the members of the audience for their participation, their engagement, their shout outs and whatever. For this hearing, it's part of our democracy. I'm from part of the country like Congressman Carr, where had it not been for this great democracy, I would have a chance to chair a committee or anything because my color prevented my father from ever having to become a registered voter before he died. So there are some things I take very personal about protecting this experiment called democracy. But elections have consequences. We have to at every opportunity to participate. We can't tune out. When you tune out, things happen, and not for the betterment of the common good. So I encourage all of us to participate. But let me thank the entire framework, your congressperson. Let's give another hand. I don't have to tell you, you're fortunate to have a jewel like your congressperson in this district. Somebody that cares, somebody that's not a freaking violent to making issues and taking public positions. So I compliment you for that. For the school board to allow us to borrow the facilities here. I thank them for the cooperation, the law enforcement, everyone. This is how democracy should work. It's participation. I encourage you to continue that process. I assure you that what we heard today and everything else become part of the official record of how we fix the problem. And look, it won't be easy, but you send us there to do the hard work, not to shirk the work like my Republican colleagues are doing. Oversight is fundamental in a democracy. If it becomes something that you don't do, then we're in serious trouble. We are in serious trouble right now because oversight is a forgotten process under this administration. So we can fix it. No, the great equalizer in this country is how you pick your leaders. It doesn't matter to status in life or anything. If you vote, you participate. If you don't vote, you can't, you don't participate. And so you can't criticize. November 3rd is one of those days, you can participate. I encourage you to do that. And if you don't like this group, vote for somebody else. But if you are upset and mad, by all means, vote. Vote for the candidate of your choice. So again, I'd like to thank Representative Penbrook for bringing us together, for her tireless work on behalf of her constituents here in this community and across Maine's first congressional district. With that, the hearing is adjourned.